The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is a proud supporter of Indian Country Today. Students at Cronkite News and Gaylord College at the University of Oklahoma cover indigenous communities together. This important work is distributed by more than 100 news organizations. This collaboration provides a much-needed boost to coverage of Native American communities nationwide. Learn more at cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalohungva. Here are the headlines from Indian Country Today. The U.S. Supreme Court is hearing oral arguments in the United States versus Cooley case. The case has to do with whether tribal police officers have the authority to detain non-natives on tribal lands. In 2016, a Crow tribal police officer detained Joshua Cooley and searched his truck, which was located in Crow territory. The officer found evidence of methamphetamine and 2 semi-automatic rifles in the passenger seat. Cooley's counsel moved to suppress the evidence on the grounds the police officer had no authority to search or detain him. The motion was granted, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit affirmed the decision. In the Oliphant versus Suquamish Indian tribe case, the High Court ruled tribal governments do not have criminal jurisdiction to punish non-natives. However, 1990's Duro versus Reyna established tribal officers' authority to investigate crimes committed by non-natives on tribal land. The case now depends on how the Supreme Court sees tribes' power to police within the context of their conquest. A new office is targeting anti-Indigenous racism in Manitoba, Canada's health system. The political advocacy group for Northern Manitoba First Nations is developing strategies to tackle the issue. Dr. Barry Lavallee, Chief Executive Officer of the Health and Wellness Agency, says once the rollout begins, First Nation healthcare will change. The agency is working with academics and epidemiologists who study how racism impacts health outcomes. And social scientists across Canada are developing processes to handle complaints of racism. Dr. Lavallee hopes to have the office open sometime this year. In Santa Fe, the New Mexico Indian Affairs Department is creating an Indigenous Youth Council. It was formed in February after listening sessions that were held with tribal youth councils. The issues discussed at the meetings were access to higher education and behavioral and mental health needs for tribal communities. They also wanted to form a connection between the nations, tribes, and pueblos in the state. The Youth Council represents 23 different tribes and will help the department steer the issues that directly affect their homes. One of those members is Jeremy Begay. He's a student and has a heart to help others.
They all talk about, mental health. And there's older adults that do the program, and they always talk about, it's important that youth voices be heard because, there is a lot of suicide rates and also drugs and alcohol.
The Youth Council will meet every 2 weeks. There's something about being outside that's focusing high school students in Canada's Northwest Territories. Milder weather means a break from the classroom. The teacher, Paul Boucher, says Kaiser High School's cultural camp is his favorite place to teach. Boucher teaches 9th grade, and his students are Chippewa, Cree, and also English and French. He says it grounds his students and gives them time to relax and get away from the schoolwork. Boucher is hoping the camp will help create a new community of language speakers. On the agenda for next week, well, they're going to be processing fish and creating traditional crafts. Well, it's going to be an intense 5 weeks for some Native writers who are hoping to join the ranks of television production. The Native American Media Alliance says 9 people will be a part of the 6th annual Native American TV Writers Lab. This fellowship will offer them script writing, workshops, seminars, and one-on-one mentoring. The goal is to prepare Natives to write for television shows and to increase the fair and accurate portrayal of Native Americans on television. Partners include Sony Pictures and the Cherokee Nation Film Office, as well as 3 other groups. Past participants have gone on to produce programs for networks. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Thalahungva. Well, today we mark our one-year anniversary for Indian Country Today, our newscast here, and we started out with the idea of broadcasting on our website and social media.
That's right, Patty, and it soon became evident that we were filling a void. People wanted to know how Indian Country was being impacted by the pandemic.
And in just a short time, we were broadcasting on the FNX network and PBS stations nationwide. So today, we're going to take you behind the scenes to show you what it took to start this newscast in the middle of a pandemic. We'll be right back.
Since we started this newscast with a focus on covering the coronavirus pandemic, Jordan Bennett Begay started creating a database of the number of COVID positive tests in Indian Country, as well as the deaths of as many tribes as we could find out.
Jordan joins us now to give us her behind-the-scenes look at providing the COVID update. Hi, Jordan. Can you believe it's already been 1 year?
I know, it's unbelievable, actually. It went by quicker than I thought.
Jordan, one of the things that's so extraordinary, and I know that you've worked extensively on this database, is we still don't know how many people have died across our communities.
Oh, we really didn't. I mean, it just still, baffles me how we still don't know the count of how many Native people have died. And, that is, there's a number of factors involved in that. I talked to Abigail Echo Hawk the other day, and she says we still don't have any idea, and that's because of racial misclassification, mainly death certificates, and there's just no standard in how to count those specific deaths, because states run on different systems, as well as tribes and their tribal health clinics. There's just a number of factors of why we won't have a specific count until, I think she said, maybe like a year or two later after the pandemic.
Well, we're certainly looking at how this data will be gathered in the years to come. But as we're in the moment now, what was that like a year ago, trying to come together with data and then working from home? Give us perspective on that, Jordan.
Sure. It was just funny just thinking about how it came from our living room, or at least my kitchen table. And I thought that we did the COVID report every day. So I thought I would just show people what it's like, down from choosing the top to my earrings as any Native woman, and drinking tea and just the routine I went through every day. We all have to, since it was from our living rooms, we would have to fix our background. So I have to fix my couch, whatever, the desk that was behind me, just so it looked semi-presentable, right? But I think that just shows that's life, and we're like any other people out there.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.
Television news directors everywhere are realizing that entire newscasts can be produced in the comfort of a home. We were no different. We had really no choice.
And the person behind our technical effort is Vincent Schilling. And Vince has been with Indian Country Today for many years, so he knows how special and different a broadcast would be for us. Here's his look back.
What a difference a year makes. 1 year ago, on April 6, 2020, the world, and of course Indian Country, was swept up in the beginnings of the coronavirus pandemic. Indian Country was disproportionately affected, and we at Indian Country Today wanted to create a way to share COVID statistics affecting Indian Country. We were all working from our home computers and doing the best we could to report from our living rooms and bedrooms with our laptops, phones, and TV screens arranged in the best ways possible to deliver the news. We tried live streams at first, but soon realized we could have a bit more control if we pre-recorded. Hey, I offered, realizing we could switch windows, project the images on larger screens with our Zoom calls. Why don't we pre-record and I can edit the show for a daily newscast? Patty had laptops positioned on a table in her living room, sat next to her television. We projected Dean Seneca onto her TV.
We're going to have to do an edit. Cool. Good thing we're not live.
Patty also connected to Zoom on a second laptop so she could hear and interact and change what was projected onto the TV. Jordan and I also joined the Zoom meeting, and I recorded from an office space in my bedroom.
Bring this down.
Oh, this is weird looking at myself.
I was watching, listening, recorded, and trying to keep track. I had a lot of editing to do in a short time. We were under pressure, and I realized soon enough what we placed on our own heads.
It's affecting Indian country, right?
1 year later, Indian Country Today has its own television studio. Patty doesn't write notes on a whiteboard. We have a teleprompter, a studio, and staff to edit, record, work the cameras and lights. We've come a long way, and we still want to grow. Happy anniversary, Newscast. It's been a wild and bumpy ride.
On behalf of Indian Country Today, thank you for joining us.
Vincent Schilling, Associate Editor, Indian Country Today.
Today, our technical staff includes Drea Yazzie and Max Montour. They are the ones who run the cameras and edit the newscast. As we prepared to go on the air, we thought about who would be the best first guest to put this pandemic in perspective. There are very few American Indians who have experience working with pandemics and infectious diseases. Dean Seneca is one of them. He worked for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in that area. In 2014, he went to the West African country of Sierra Leone, which was in the midst of the Ebola pandemic. There, he worked with tribal leaders to help the community understand how they could help stop the spread of Ebola. He learned some of those lessons there that he's tried to help tribes with this year to fight the coronavirus pandemic. We thought it was fitting to have him back on our 1-year anniversary to talk about the lessons learned. Welcome, Dean.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Let's start by taking a look at what you said a year ago about how tribes were prepared or not to handle this pandemic.
I really went back and did some investigative work into what was really occurring in China. And I looked at the incubation period of this virus and the whole concept of not showing any symptoms and still have the virus and could be a carrier and transmit the virus to other people. I literally got back and contacted Indian Country Today and said, we are not prepared.
Looking back, what strikes you about your prediction?
Well, unfortunately, I was right. We really are not prepared, or we're not prepared for a virus like this. We have about 190,000 infections throughout Indian Country right now. We just have over 6,100 deaths, and those are climbing. We have some significant health disparities throughout all of the statistics regarding COVID-19 infection. Right now, our hospitalization rates are 3.8, almost 4 times higher than the white population. Our death rates are 2.7 higher than the Asian population, and almost 2% higher than the white population. So we're dying at twice as the rate as any other racial group. And our infections, we're being infected our incidence rates are 3.5 times higher than the white population. So we're being infected much higher. So, and then here, we are being vaccinated very well. We have in many of our communities, up to 60 to 80 to 90% of the community and vaccinated, but still we're seeing spikes and we're seeing cases climb in our communities. So, we can't let our guard down. We have let our guard down. I have spotters throughout the whole country, reporting, communities not, really practicing prevention, not wearing a mask, not practicing safe social distancing, not washing their hands properly. And, that has impacted us throughout the whole pandemic.
Does the vaccine protocol actually make it more risky?
The vaccines are going to make us, this is pretty much all we have right now in order to fight the pandemic. Our contact tracing efforts, throughout the whole country have been my major complaint in the whole response, actually. And everything else, as far as, shutting down and opening up, and the mixed messages around wearing a mask and not wearing a mask. The vaccines are our only protection. So, so I'm encouraging, and I've received my vaccine. I'm encouraging everyone to get their vaccine.
We know that this may not be the only pandemic we face. Are there lessons that we've learned from this that can apply to others, or are we going to be in the same boat again?
Well, I hope so. I think the big lesson that the United States learned is that we have to make our own equipment here. We have to make our protective equipment here. We can't rely on other countries or have these things made in other places. So manufacturing, when it comes to preparedness, really needs to come back home. I think many of our tribal communities, some of our tribal communities were hit pretty hard, 50 deaths here, 50 deaths there out of, very small communities. Those things are just devastating. So, I'm hoping that our tribal nations have learned a big lesson. I'm hoping that in the future that we really get geared up and put preparedness at the top of the list of all of our other things that we're doing out in Indian country in order to stay safe. I would bet that that more tribal nations wish that they were in lockdown a lot sooner and enforce rules a little more stricter throughout Indian country as we kind of are learning lessons as we go. But I will say this: when I first made the prediction that we were not ready for this pandemic, many of my colleagues got really upset at me. And, they basically said they wanted to prove that they were prepared, but, we didn't have people to deploy. We didn't have contact tracers on staff in order to go and investigate cases readily and easily. We didn't have protective gear in place in order to protect our healthcare workforce and, to protect the contact tracers and community meet people and things, we don't have the data systems in place in order to actually, find out who's infected and who's not, to get accurate counts of, how number of people tested negative, number of people tested positive, total number tested, and how many cases, how many active cases we're seeing in the community, so, the ability to share information is very limited as well. So, I'm thinking that the IHS is really going to, or should, really develop a preparedness component, for things like this within the organization so that they can, work with other emergency preparedness components and other HHS emergency preparedness people to be on the ground quicker and be able to respond faster when things like this come up.
We only have a minute left, but I wanted to ask you, where do you think we're going to be in a year from now?
Well, it's going to be a challenge. We have, 3 variants. We know that we have 3 variants. They're just reported at Navajo Nation, for example. So, we have 4 states right there, and these things are circulating there. I'm hoping that a variant doesn't, develop from these other variants that, would make the vaccine ineffective. I think that that's our biggest fear. So, this fight is not over. We're probably in the middle of the fight, in a long 15 rounder. What I would hope that we could do is really, make it a priority within this country to really lock down, everybody to wear a mask and everybody to do their best to get vaccinated and practice prevention. That's the only thing that we're going to be able to do is to really fight this virus. And it has to be everybody. One thing I'd like to remind our audience is that the virus does not stop at the reservation line, okay? And this does not discriminate. So when you have people in your home that have been out and you don't know if they've been practicing prevention and they come into the community, they come back into the house, and they take off their mask, you have to be sure they're not carrying something in the home, especially amongst, for our elders too. So, and that's the main route of infection in Indian country right now and throughout the whole country.
Thank you, Dean. You have the distinction of being our only guest who has been in our newscast in every setting, from the living room where we started to the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center, and now our home at Arizona State University. So thank you, Dean Seneca, for being an expert guest on the pandemic.
All right, I'm honored. Thank you for having me.
And we'll be right back with more coverage of our 1-year anniversary.
In this past year, we've brought you hundreds of guests who are all experts in their areas. Here's a quick look at many of them from 52 weeks of newscasts. There's certainly no shortage of news coming out of Indian country, with native sources playing a major role, whether it was the Mars rover making news, or the fight to protect sacred lands, such as Oak Flat, or a look at Indigenous foods, or Indigenous love. We heard from reporters covering Indian country in our Reporters Roundtable. We heard from political leaders, political observers, and political persuaders. To the arts, the halls of Congress, and news from Alaska Natives, we covered Indian country. Some guests made us laugh. Many inspired us. And throughout the year, tribal leaders kept us informed on how the pandemic was impacting their people. These are just a few of our guests from our first year, and we thank them for sharing their expertise.
A remarkable year of guests on Indian Country Today. We remain committed to bringing you experts from across Indian Country. Our newscasts evolved from covering the COVID-19 pandemic to covering all the news from an Indigenous perspective. The goal is to have ICT be a nationwide news program. That means old-fashioned television broadcasting. How does this happen? Well, stations nationwide have noticed. They're calling us to see how they can carry our program. Joining us now to talk about how you can actually watch us on television is our Vice President for Broadcasting, Shirley Sneevy. Welcome, Shirley.
Thanks, Mark. Good to see you.
So what's the challenge of creating a national and distributing a national television show for Indigenous news?
Real estate. It's all about real estate. There are only a certain number of hours in the day. And some of these programs, as you know, have been on PBS for years and years and years. And so to find a reason for individual stations to carry this, that's the other thing about the PBS system, is that each station is unique and they really are there to serve their audiences. So what we saw early on is a lot of states, South Dakota, North Dakota, Oklahoma, that have a large population of Native Americans were quick to get on the bandwagon and carry the program. Now we're to the point where our delivery system is stable. And I know that's an interesting thing to say, but you know, we have to have closed captioning, and we tape this program early in the morning, get it closed captioned. And the broadcast team, Dre and Max, have just been outstanding in getting the program to the stations in time to broadcast. The first broadcast time that we're on is 6:30 Central Daylight Time in Oklahoma. And I think that's just a remarkable feat to deliver a daily program like that.
You've seen the growth from this from a number of perspectives. What's your takeaway from the growth of the newscast?
I think that it's a program that's really important because nobody does this kind of work in public broadcasting. You know, we're in 17 states and 2 foreign countries. And I think that's remarkable for a program that's only a year old. The fact that it's a half-hour newscast makes it easier to program. And I think we'll see more and more stations pick it up as we get the program out there.
Thank you, Shirley Snevy.
Thanks, Mark. You're welcome.
So that does it. We wrap up 1 full year of bringing you news from Indian country. Why does this matter? News has always been about us. We get excited when there's a story or even a clip of someone we know interviewed on a national news program. But what's missing is our voices, our history, our perspective. The stories have to be by us and for us, not just about us. This broadcast then becomes the norm, the routine. We thank you for watching us. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. We'll be back with another edition tomorrow. I'm Mark Trahant.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
Indian Country Today is produced at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
This is Indian Country Today.